Well, appreciate you being here this afternoon. We're now going to take we're not even going to take a break. We're just going to move into our question and answer session. I've got a few questions, I think, right here. If you have any that you have written down, you can send them to me. If you'll pop up my other presentation, and we'll go with the question that, well, lots of us were asking at the end of my dinosaur presentation. Here's what, there are a couple of 9-year-olds. This doesn't look like it was written by a 9-year-old. This is one of those I'm asking for a friend question. Like, we got some 9-year-olds who, quick rules for question and answer session with Kyle Butt. Not hard, real easy to understand. Just make sure the questions are polite and are ones that I know the answers to. That's all we need. Just make sure that I know them, and I will. Where did the dinosaurs go? Okay, so as we move to that dinosaur presentation that I had, where did the dinosaurs go? Yeah, that's a great question. Here's what you were told as to where the dinosaurs went. You're told that 65 million years ago, there was a huge asteroid, meteor, that hit the Yucatan Peninsula close to Mexico, and that caused all kinds of wildfires that put all kinds of soot and smoke into the atmosphere, that then caused a bunch of acid rain that killed all of the plants, and the dinosaurs that were eating the plants died because they couldn't live through that either. Couple problems with that idea. If I were to ask you, are dinosaurs extinct? Well, the answer to that is yeah, sure, dinosaurs are extinct. Technically, yes, but not really. And here's what I mean by that. The word dinosaur means fearfully great lizard, or very big lizard, or very big reptile. Now, do we still have some very big reptiles on the planet today? Absolutely. In fact, a saltwater crocodile, 32 feet long, some of them, that can weigh over 2,000 pounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're talking about a saltwater crocodile that's from where I started to here that can weigh more than a very large bull. Is that a really big lizard? Sure, absolutely. We've got the Komodo dragon that can be 10 feet long, can weigh 200 pounds. Got some really big reptiles still that were alive at the time of dinosaurs. Now, work with me. When I say were alive at the time of dinosaurs, all kinds of stuff was alive at the time of dinosaurs because dinosaurs were created with every other animal at the very beginning. So don't let the evolutionary idea get in there. But sharks were supposed to be 150 million years old. They're still here. Crocodiles, alligators, supposed to be, 150 million years old. They're still here. And crocodiles, alligators, big turtles, etc., they're big lizards. And so in one way, we've just conveniently defined dinosaurs out of existence. Okay, all really big lizards that we call dinosaurs don't live any longer, but all the ones that are still alive weren't dinosaurs. Oh, well, that's convenient, especially in the fact that some of those things that they called dinosaurs weren't really big at all. They were the size of chickens. Like there were some Coelophysis dinosaurs that were, 18 inches high. Some of them weighed less than a pound, some of them 2 or 3 pounds, and they're called really big or fearfully great lizards. Well, why are they called dinosaurs, but a 32-foot long crocodile is not? Well, you see what I'm saying there. We still got a bunch of big lizards that are still alive and were alive at the time of the dinosaurs. And so the question then is, well, all right, as we go through that, with the guy in the back that is going to allow me to move forward with this clicker. Any way we can get that done? Okay, well, wait just a second. I will take this time to tell you about my buddy who had a kid that was chewing on electrical cords. Said he got in bad trouble. Had to ground him. But, that was shocking to the family. It was. But currently he's conducting himself properly, so it's no problem there. This is the Dinosaur National Monument out in Blanding, Utah. And is it Blanding, Utah? I don't think, no, this isn't Blanding. This is Utah, though. Here's what's interesting. If you could see this, I don't think you can even go visit this anymore because the funding hasn't been there and the building is pulling away from the side of the cliff. If you could look straight through that glass, you would see this as the wall. There's no wall, there's no brick or anything. They just built it onto all of these fossils. There are about 1,600 different fossils here. This is one of the more famous fossil graveyards. And there are all kinds of different dinosaurs jumbled up together. And as you go, it's a couple stories. And like, let's say that's the fossil wall. Over here, you walk down a ramp, and you can walk on the bottom, and then you walk up to the second level. And there are little placards that explain all the stuff to you. And so this placard is there. It's a picture of what they think happened in this particular place. And they say, after a seasonal flood, this scene of 145 million years ago, based on clues found in the rock face, carcasses brought downstream by fast-moving, muddy water. Some were buried completely by tons of sand. Their bones were preserved in near perfect state. If you run over a armadillo, does it fossilize? No. In fact, it's very hard to fossilize something. You've got to get rid of a couple things to get a real fossil. You've got to get rid of scavengers, like buzzards and crows and stuff that would eat it, and you've got to get rid of oxygen. And you have to have it buried really, really quick from an anaerobic, non-oxygen area so that it can then fossilize. Okay, well, how do you do that? If you look at almost every single dinosaur graveyard in the world that they've ever found, every one, here's what they say: fast-moving local flood, a regional flood, a flash flood, a flood. Almost every single large fossil graveyard ever is described as having come from a flood. Now, quick question. Do you know of a flood that could have brought about massive graveyards of hundreds of dinosaurs at once jumbled together and buried immediately? Sure you do. In fact, there are over 285 legends all over the world of a global or massive flood that killed virtually everything on the planet, and many of them have only one family being saved, and that family somehow got a divine revelation to build something like a boat, and it's in cultures all over the planet for thousands of years. If there really was a flood and Noah and his family were saved, when they got off the boat, do you think that they would have told their children what happened? And those children would have told their children, and those children would have told their children. And as they dispersed all over the world, that story of the flood would have gotten changed and adjusted, but the kernels of truth would have been there. Absolutely, positively. It's exactly what you would have expected to happen. Would that have been a great explanation of why thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands of animals like the dinosaurs would have all died at once and been buried immediately and fossilized? Sure. But now you're probably thinking through it. Okay, if that's the case, we were looking at the Anasazi Indian carvings, looked like a dinosaur. We were looking at the Cambodia temple in 1187, looked like a dinosaur. So if people were carving stuff that looked like a dinosaur in 1187, then that means some of them must have lived through the flood. And if they were land animals and they lived through the flood, they had to have been on the ark. And I mean, you can imagine how that went. Ham, your turn to feed the Tyrannosaurus Rex today. Not doing it. Almost got my arm bit off yesterday. Well, I don't know how that would have played out, but okay, and here's the other thing. Let's say you got two of those Apatosauruses that can each weigh 116 tons, and sometimes they're 125 feet long. How are you going to fit a pair of those on the ark? And that's just the Apatosauruses. That's not talking about the Tyrannosaurus Rex or some of the other kinds of dinosaurs. What are you going to do about that? That's interesting. I found an article from some guys in the Philippines that found a 24-foot long alligator. This wasn't saltwater crocodile 32. This is just a 24-foot long alligator. So you're talking, 8 good steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. From there to here, weighed 2,000 pounds. Do you know how big a 24-foot long, 2,000-pound alligator starts out? 8 inches or so, hatches out of a normal alligator egg. Do you ever read where God said, Noah, I'm going to bring to you two of the largest Apatosaurus dinosaurs that I can find to put on the ark. What would have made very good sense if God brought to Noah juvenile dinosaurs? The largest dinosaur egg we've ever found is 24 inches long. A 24-inch long dinosaur egg that would have held one of those really, really big plant-eating dinosaurs that if they had lived 50, 60, 100, 200, 300 years, etc., start out in a egg not much bigger than a football? Does it make good sense that, number one, God would know the size of the ark needed to be to put all the animals on it, and number two, he could have easily brought juvenile animals to Noah and his family to put on that ark, and they could have lived? Sure, absolutely. Now, does that answer the question of what happened to the dinosaurs? Kind of. It kind of does. Except they're still extinct. You know, why don't we have the dinosaurs like the Tyrannosaurus rex and the Apatosaurus, etc.? And why do we have other reptiles? That I don't know. And the answer to that is simply different kinds of things go extinct in different ways and at different speeds. The fact of the matter is right now, and this is interesting, the largest animal ever to have existed, ever in the history of the world, still lives, still exists. It's the blue whale. Some blue whales can be 300,000 pounds, twice as big as the biggest Apatosaurus dinosaur we've ever seen. They have a heart the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. An adult male can crawl through the aorta of a blue whale. 50 grown adults can stand on the tongue of a blue whale. Massive, huge creatures. But now there's probably only one reason they're still alive. We made it illegal to kill them. We were getting so good at killing blue whales with nothing more than some iron and basically sticks that we had to outlaw it, or we were going to hunt them to extinction, because lots of times the things that go extinct the quickest are the things that are the biggest, because they take the most resources to keep alive. So if you have an Apatosaurus that's got to consume 3,000 pounds of vegetation every single day, is that going to be very hard to come up with the energy and the resources to keep that type of thing alive? Absolutely, positively. And so we have the dinosaurs that we have defined as these fearfully great, terribly great creatures. We have defined them out of existence, meaning there are lots of still really, really big lizards that are still alive. But the ones we call dinosaurs are extinct, and they went extinct just like all the other creatures that are extinct for reasons that would be similar to them. Maybe they were overhunted. Maybe they lost habitat. Maybe they did die in catastrophes like the flood. And if you kill most of the dinosaurs during the flood and then you have one pair, is it going to be very much more difficult for them to reproduce and come to the levels that they were before the flood? Most likely. And so that's how that would have run. And now, I mean, if you look at this, after the flood, do you remember what God told Noah in Genesis chapter 9? It looks like before the flood there might have been some different regulations, but after the flood he said, now every single animal on the planet can be food for you. And the fear of you and the dread of you is going to be on all the animals, and your relationship to the animals looks like it was going to be different after the flood than it was before the flood. Looks like it might not have been God ordained for humans to eat all of the animals before the flood, but after the flood it was going to be. Does that mean people could have hunted dinosaurs and eaten them if they wanted to? Absolutely, positively. So things were going to change in that direction. So why did the dinosaurs go extinct? We don't know. What's the best explanation for the dinosaur graveyards that we see? The flood. What happened to all of the other creatures like the saber-toothed tiger and the woolly mammoth and the dodo bird and all of those creatures? They went extinct just like the dinosaurs. And that's what we got going. It's a good answer. Maybe not as satisfying as we'd like it to be, but still very much in line with all of the evidence. All right. Second question. What was the Leviathan? In Job chapter 41, we have the question of what was the Leviathan? The answer is probably some type of fire-breathing, lizard-like dragon/dinosaur creature. And you say that and say, okay, Kyle, really? I mean, are you going to say that some type of creature actually did ever breathe fire? Let me ask you this question. How smart is it to step in a bathtub with a plugged-in toaster submerged in it? Not smart at all. In fact, you're not going to make it through that one. That's not a joke in any way. Don't do that. It will literally kill you. But is there a creature right now that's about this big, it's about the size of a good Arkansas rattlesnake, that can produce 500 volts of electricity in water that can stun a horse and kill a human being, and it doesn't even shock itself? It produces real electricity that will kill you. An electric eel? Now, how in the world does a creature produce real electricity that is enough to kill a human and doesn't even shock itself? Well, it just so happens that animals have all kinds of features that are fascinating. There's a bombardier beetle that has a compartment in its back that it can punch in hydroquinones and can punch in something kind of like peroxide and then put an enzyme in it and mix it together, and in 1 second or more it boils that to 216 degrees and launches it out the back turret gun-like section of its back end at frogs that try to get it, and it's a chemical reaction that reaches 216 degrees in a second. We have found some dinosaurs that have some really fascinating features that we don't know what they do. Like there's something called a Parasaurolophus that has a long bone structure above its head that is hollow. Now, if you had a creature and you start processing some of this information that ate 3,000 pounds of vegetation a day, how much flammable methane gas would that produce? And it somehow had a compartment that it could contain that? And then maybe we know that they swallowed stones to help in digestion, but if they somehow bit into something like flint with their teeth and got that in between their teeth and had a compartment that they could regurgitate some of that gas and clip that flint together in their teeth and shoot that out, is it very possible that they could produce something that we would find very similar to fire, smoking fire like the bombardier beetle? Absolutely positive. Is it coincidence that the stories of dragons across the eons, across the millennia, from Inuits to Aztecs, tell about huge lizards that can produce smoking, smoldering flame out of their mouth, and somehow they all do, and they couldn't have copied each other? Well, if you can get an electric eel, and you can get a bombardier beetle, and you can get a lightning bug that can produce cold light from its back end that we can't even copy from our best engineers, because if we could cut down on all kinds of electrical bills, and it would be a process that you'd probably get the Nobel Peace Prize for, or at least some real serious science awards for, and we can't even copy it and do what they do. Yeah. There's some real features in the animal kingdom that make it where the Leviathan could easily be a fire-breathing, dragon-like creature. That's not unbelievable at all. I mean, it's not near as unbelievable as life coming from non-living chemicals and then changing from one kind of life to another kind of life. Now, that is unbelievable. That's non-factual. Okay, so there you go. That's all the questions I got. What else y'all got? What you got, Walter? What do I think would happen if dinosaurs were still alive? What happens with saltwater crocodiles? That would be my question. Okay, so you got a 32-foot long, vicious, very aggressive saltwater crocodile. You ever seen one? Personally? You ever petted one? You ever wanted to be close to one? If you know where a 30-foot long saltwater crocodile is, do you build your house by it? There are 8 billion people on the planet. Most of us have never seen a saltwater crocodile for the same reason that the robber doesn't see policemen. They're not trying to be where they are. They want to be the opposite direction. And so what I think would happen is they would still be alive in very remote places. We would probably have destroyed most of their habitat. There would only be a few of them. And humans and them would avoid as much interaction as possible. That's what I would suggest. That makes sense to you? I mean, that's what I do with saltwater crocodiles. So, good question. Okay, what you got?
How do scientists know
Okay. He says, how do scientists know how big stars are? The composition of planets, the makeup of the stars, etc. There are any number of ways, most of which are all indirect. And I'll give you an example of this. So let's say you have a star, and there is a planet that is circling that star, and the gravitation of that star keeps the planet going this particular speed, etc. So you take basically your law of gravity and you apply the mathematics to how fast that planet is moving around it, or how slow it is, or how far out it is, etc. And then you can kind of come up with the mass of that planet. And if you can look at that planet and see the mass and see that, okay, well, if it was made out of some type of metal, it would look much smaller, but if it was some less massive substance like dirt, it would be bigger, or a gas, etc. And so that's kind of how they come up with the ideas of the composition and things, especially the stars. Lots of times it'll be the color of the light and the kind of burning that it's doing. If it's red light, it's this. If it's blue light, it's this. And that temperature will mean it's been burning this long. For a lot of it's very indirect and based on stuff that's closer to us that we can know. And then, okay, well, if the one close to us has this kind of mass and it does this, and that one's doing that, then it must have this kind of mass and do that. Now, that's a kind of very simple answer to that. And we've got a guy by the name of Branyan May and his wife Alana. They are, he writes for us some. He's got a PhD in astrophysics from University of Alabama that could give you way more specifics on that. And he writes for us some. If you just type in Branyan May on our website, Branyan May, there are some stuff that would help with that. That's a really good question. I'll give you another, sometimes you won't even see there'll be a star, and they will think that there are planets going around the star, but they won't even see the planets. But there'll be a little wobble in the light of the star. And so they will ask the question, okay, how big would the planet have to be to cause the light around that star to wobble like that, the gravitational pull? And so they will calculate that and say, okay, that planet that's circling around the star that we think is there must be about this big to cause the wobble of the light that's going on like that. So, yeah, good question. Yes, sir. Don't you love this second pew right here? This second pew I've been real proud of. You talk about some listeners and pay attention, been on everything, got questions. You guys need to be proud of these guys right here. Yes.
Why do you think God created dinosaurs?
Why do I think God created dinosaurs? To me, that's an easy question, and that is God created things to show His awesome power and glory. And that's why I think He was talking to Job about the behemoth. And He was saying, okay, which of us has not been fascinated? I mean, it's almost like humans are designed to love the idea of a dinosaur. Like every human, it doesn't matter what country they're from, what dinosaurs universally talk to the imagination of people, it seems to me. Every kid that I know, male or female, in whatever country, they love dinosaurs. Okay, Dinosaurs Unleashed, our most popular book we've ever put out. It could be because the authors are such great, insightful writers, or there's a Tyrannosaurus Rex on the front cover. I mean, which one is it? Probably. Okay, it's the T-Rex. And I believe God designed them to do like He did with Job, and to say, Job, look at this humongous creature. I made him. I created him. I feed him and his kind every single day. 3,000 pounds of vegetation every day for a whole herd of these creatures. If I can do that, how awesome do I have to be? And I think it was just, hey. But now here's the other cool thing about this. Okay, you go from a dinosaur to a bumblebee hummingbird. Okay, a bumblebee hummingbird is 2 inches long. It's got 1,000 feathers, beautiful colored feathers. It's got a working beak, 2 eyes. It's got a heart that can beat 1,200 times in a minute. And it lays little eggs that are smaller than coffee beans. Okay, the God that can create a 300,000-pound blue whale or a 126-foot long apatosaurus can also create a 2-inch hummingbird that its heart can beat 1,200 times in a single minute. I think God just wants to show you the variety and say, this is the stuff I can do. And so that's why. And there again, I also always want to remind us that that's why He created you. To bring glory to God. To say, don't look at me, look at my Creator. And in action form and in design form, that's the purpose of a human. The Bible says, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, that my soul knows right well. Your human brain is the 3 pounds of most complex matter in the universe. Anybody that looks at it should say, wow, the Creator is awesome. But then by your actions, remember what Jesus said? Let your light so shine therefore before men that men may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Not only should they be amazed by God's creative activity looking at your brain, but they also should be amazed at God's love and plan for salvation by looking at your actions. And all of that should be pointing to, look at my God. My brain shows there's an awesome God. My actions show there's an awesome God. The dinosaur shows there's an awesome God. The 2-inch bumblebee hummingbird shows there's an awesome God. That's the point of all of it. Good question. Yes, sir. I'll get you in a minute.
How do we know what the dinosaurs look like on the outside from just their bones?
All right, that's a great question. How do we know what the dinosaurs look like on the outside from just their bones? We don't. A lot of times we don't know if there were any colors, don't know what kind of skin looked like. They could have, and we have often recreated dinosaurs in a way we thought they looked like, and then we found different bones or different skin, etc., and realized, oh, we were terribly wrong on that. The iguanodon, originally we put this horn that we thought was the iguanodon horn right on its nose like a rhinoceros, and then we found another real iguanodon that actually they go on their thumbs, their big thumbnails that they use for different things, and they didn't go on their horns, on their noses. So we get that wrong a lot. Sometimes, however, though, there's one, it's an ankylosaurus, that looks like it was preserved in a bog type thing, and its fossil has the skin and everything. So it is a fossilized dinosaur with it looks like almost just a full dinosaur. It's not just the bones. It's got its back and its shell and its skin and stuff. So sometimes we run into some dinosaur skin and soft tissue that has been fossilized that we know a little bit more about it. But lots of times, many of the dinosaurs, we don't really even know how they walked. We don't really even know how they stood or if they were on 2 legs or 4 legs. Or sometimes we use the footprints that we find to say, okay, well, these footprints go this way, so they must have stood up on 2 legs, and they didn't drag their tails because there's no tail mark and some things like that. But lots of times we don't know the information. So, well, and when you watch Jurassic Park and you see the velociraptors that are looking at you and they're actually kind of talking to you, that little clink clink sound, and they somehow can communicate to humans. You know, guess what? Velociraptor was only about 3 feet tall. Was shorter than your regular hip. They blew them up 400% for Jurassic Park just because it's a lot more exciting, and they knew that a person with a good 12-gauge shotgun would have no problem taking care of them, but that doesn't make for a good movie plot, and so they just made them bigger than they really knew they were. And that happens. That kind of stuff happens. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, hey, great question. She said, can you explain the difference between natural selection and evolution? Now, here is what is presented as the mechanism for evolution. That mutations that get in a genome are then selected naturally using natural selection, and that is the engine for evolution. And so here's how it's presented to you. You will have an amoeba. Let's just say that single-celled amoeba. It will somehow, the DNA will mutate to where that amoeba grows a little bit of a little tail. And that tail gives it some type of living advantage. where that tail makes it where it can move just a little bit and the other amoebas can't. And so the ones that can move live and the ones that can't die. And so now that mutation with the little tail now is the amoeba that's lived. And then another mutation will hit and it'll give it two tails. And natural selection will pick for the one with two because the two help it move better. And now all the ones with one died and now you got two. Okay, the idea of natural selection is a great idea and works perfectly for what it was designed to do. And that is eliminate less than robust structures from a gene pool. And let me tell you what I mean by that. If you have when you have rabbits, is that called a litter of rabbits? I don't know what you have. Is it litter? We'll call them litters. You got a litter of rabbits and you got 12 of them. 2 of them are born with back legs that are shorter than the other 10. Meaning they're not going to be able to run as fast or hop as high. If you're a predator, which 2 are mostly going to be your dinner? Okay, the 2 that don't run as fast or hop as high. Okay, so they get eaten. So now that gene is eliminated from the rabbit pool, and so now, from now on, because all the ones that have short ones get eaten, they don't make it to the next generation, and so, okay, you just got the fast rabbits. Okay, great, natural selection did its job. Here's where evolution and natural selection don't work. And there's a very famous statement that says this, that natural selection can account for the survival of the fittest, but it can't account for the arrival of the fittest. In order for evolution to be true, you'd have to be adding new features and new information to the genome for nature to be selecting. But there's no mechanism at all. Mutations don't add information. They only mutate and mess up information that's there. And so lots of times you'll be told a bacteria mutation was selected for, and that proves that evolution is true. We hear this a lot. Let me show you what I mean. There'll be a antibiotic that work with me. You're just going to work with the little illustration here. But there'll be an antibiotic that attacks the right arm of a bacteria. Okay? And so all the bacteria that have a right arm, it attacks them, it grabs them by the right arm, and basically wrestles them to the ground and kills them. Well, there will be one of those bacteria that is mutated and the genetic information has been altered so that it doesn't have a right arm. Well, now that antibiotic can't attack the right arm of that bacteria, and so the bacteria that don't have right arms become the prevalent bacteria, and all the ones that do have right arms, okay, they're all dead. You following the illustration now? Okay, so we're told that that is evolution, and that proves that you can get an amoeba to a human. But here's the problem. You didn't add any new information. In fact, you lost the right arm on that bacteria. And when the antibiotic that is removed from the situation is no longer present, guess what? Now you have a bacteria that only has one left arm. So it's not a stronger, better bacteria that's moving toward becoming something else. It's a bacteria where you've lost information. And so what I'd say to your question, it's a really good question, and that is absolutely natural selection and or intelligent selection would do that. Like let's say you have a cow and you start breeding cows and you want them to be the meatiest that they can possibly be. Well, you start picking the ones that are the meatiest and you put them back together, and you don't put the ones that aren't, and you sell those off, and you can breed to get really strong, robust, good, meaty cows. But there's no mechanism that's giving you new information for those cows to grow wings or those cows to become lizards. The genetic information needed to add more stuff to the genome is not there. Mutations don't do it because mutations only mess up and alter information that's already there. They don't give you new stuff. And so that's what you've got going. Really good question. Yes, sir, Walter. Give me that thing. Give me that thing. This is Walter's card of questions. I don't know what number he's to, but it's filled. So here you go, Walter. Let's go.
Do you think that we could bring back dinosaurs from the fossil?
Do I think we could bring back dinosaurs? No, not necessarily. In theory, maybe. In theory, maybe. Because if you had a full DNA, strand, you could, in theory, put it in something like a sheep egg and get it like Dolly. You can clone stuff. But DNA breaks down so fast, it's so fragile, that trying to get, even with soft tissue, you're not going to find DNA much. Now, if we happen to find a good, well-preserved DNA of a dinosaur, it's possible. I mean, they're working on it with a woolly mammoth. If I understand it right, they're trying to take some woolly mammoth DNA and put it into an elephant cell and clone it. But I don't think they've been successful yet. Well, here's the thing about it. He said we couldn't Jurassic Park it. The thing is, in theory, yeah. In theory, you could. Except just think about it like this. I'm trying to think that getting DNA to stay preserved whole it's so fragile that just doesn't. I mean, immediately when that dinosaur died, it would start breaking down. It would be difficult. So, in theory, yes. Practically speaking, no. That's like, in theory, could I dunk a basketball? Yeah. Practically speaking, I've tried to jump over like 5 inches my whole life and never been close to it. So it's probably never happening. That's what I would say there. Good question. All right, let's take a couple more. What you got?
Well, I had one for my daughter. Since there was a flood, how did underwater dinosaurs become extinct?
Okay, another great question. Sometimes I think maybe the pictures of the flood that we see in our Bible story books have done it injustice. And you've got Noah and all his little friendly animals sitting up on the ark, and they're just kind of floating around in the sun. And, okay, if there was, and there was, a cataclysmic happening where the fountains of the deep broke open, and every single mountain on the planet was covered by, you're looking at 20 feet of water. What would have to happen in order for that to be the case? You're talking about deep hydrothermal vents, underwater volcanoes exploding and shooting massive. When you have an earthquake that is not even a huge one, the tsunami that comes from that, and the devastation of a singular earthquake that kills 300,000 people, in Haiti or the surrounding area, from just a single, not even huge earthquake. And if you had earthquakes going on all over the planet with lava and molten stuff pouring up out of the bottom, you're talking about, there was nothing calm about the flood, and you would have had probably boiling hot lava water that would have come up out of the bottom of the oceans that would have probably killed immediately anything close to that, and the tsunamis and the mud slides and the covering up of stuff. Most everything would have been killed. I mean, even the fish and stuff that are in the ocean that could survive, many of them did. But, I mean, if you're looking at God preserved a pair of all the unclean animals on the ark, well, in the wild, probably more than that lived, but maybe not much more. And so this was not oh, hey, everything in the ocean is going to be all right, but the stuff on the earth is all going to drown. No, this is, hey, massive devastation in every shape. And so that's what I think you had going. I think most everything would have just been, and what you find, interestingly, and now this is an interesting stat just for your info, I think 95 or 98% of all the fossils that we have right now are ocean living creatures. Well, think about that. Of all the stuff that died in the flood, what would have been the first things to be fossilized, buried, and killed? The stuff on the bottom of the oceans. And so they didn't make it through just regular. I mean, most all that stuff got wiped out too. But now some of it would have lived. Great question. Okay? Yes, sir? Now, here is the interesting fact. Here's this question. What extra biblical evidence do we have of a young earth? We got all kinds. If the assumptions used to date the old earth are granted for young earth stuff. And here's what I mean by that. Every dating method is based on three assumptions. Number one, there was no parent element at the first, or there was a clean slate at the first. Number two, everything has happened at the same rate as it's happening now. And number three, nothing altered the situation. Now, that's more complicated if you look at the specific dating methods. But if you use those three assumptions, well, the salinity in the ocean. We can see how much salt is in the ocean right now. We can see how much is being added every single year. We can extrapolate back from that if the same amount that's being added every year now has been added in the past, then we should have, okay, well, it shouldn't be the hundreds of millions of years that the evolutionists say. It's much, much younger than it. But the evolutionists would step in and say, well, hold on just a second. We don't know that it was always the same amount of salt being added to the ocean every year in the past. Okay, you're right. And so the reason we don't ever say, hey, I know from a scientific dating method how old the earth is because those assumptions can never really be granted. But if they are, there's about 100 different dating methods that if you use them, the gravitational pull of the magnetic, I'm trying to think exactly. We've got an article of 21 different young earth dating methods that if you use the same assumptions as the evolutionary dating methods, they give you a young earth. But there again, like I said, we don't present them like that because, hey, we know these assumptions could be wrong. We know there could have been some parent element at the beginning and that would have changed the date. And we know that something could have happened to it in the last 3,000 years. And we know. So we've got a lot, but we don't use them as definitive like the millions of years dating methods that the evolutionists use because that's why we challenge their dating methods. Hold on, you don't know that stuff. And so you can't use the dating methods like that. There are a couple that I was thinking of. It's the magnetic force around the planet Earth, the salinity of the ocean. We've got a whole list that are skipping me right now, but just look up 21 young Earth dating methods on our AP site, and that'll get it. Okay, last question. This is it. What you got?
After the flood, whenever God told Noah and his family that people weren't going to live as long from then on, do you think that he decreased the lifespan of animals?
Okay, really good question. After the flood, I don't know that God told them specifically they're not going to live as long, although that 120 years might be something like that. But he says after the flood, when humans stopped living as long, they stopped living 900 years, 800 years, could it have been that animals lived longer too before and things were going to be different? Could be. You know, we have fossilized millipedes and centipedes that are 6 feet long and that are the size of a drainage pipe. You've never seen a millipede or a centipede like that. We've got some fossilized dragonflies that are 6 feet wide that would be as big as a human. You've never seen anything like that. There was something going on in the DNA of some creatures and people probably before the flood that was very different than after the flood. We don't know exactly what it was. The environment might have been very different. There might have been less radiation, might have been less ultraviolet light coming through, doing damage to cells, etc. Who knows? But yes, could have been very, as you look at like a turtle, you know, some turtles that we know live 274 years, pretty good while. Could there have been massive lizards like dinosaurs that as long as they lived, they grew? And one of the reasons they were so big was because they lived 500 years, 600 years, 700 years? Yes. And after the flood, that was different? Yes. Very much could have been the case. Okay, well, you guys have taught me a lot today, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate your presence here. We will be here tomorrow at 9 for the Bible class, and we'll be looking at what would happen if a person put atheistic ideas into practice. What are the fruits of atheism? and what are the fruits of Christianity. And then 10 o'clock, we'll be talking about how we can present our young people with a defensible faith that they can stand behind and they can be proud of, and that they can be bravely, courageously, actively trying to show other people that faith. On the back, we've got materials from AP. Like I said, we're nonprofit. They've got prices on there, but any of that is adjustable. If there's anything that you need, any amount of any of that you need, if you say, hey, I could use 30 of these truth be tolds in my class at school, okay, we'll get them to you. We'll get them to you for $5 a piece. Well, I don't have $5. We'll get them to you $2 a piece. Okay, I don't have $2. Okay, fine. We'll mail them to you and get somebody else to pay the $2 for them. It doesn't matter. We want them out there and into the hands of the kids that need them. Excuse me. One thing I would like to just give a little commercial for is our Apologetics Press Defending the Faith Study Bible. It is a compilation of everything we've done in the last 40 years in a study Bible format where you would expect to find the stuff. At the beginning, we have all the stuff in Genesis and the first few chapters on biogenesis and creation, etc. We've got all the evidence for the inspiration of the Bible with the archaeological evidence and stuff scattered all through. When you read about Hezekiah, well, then we've got the archaeological evidence for Hezekiah's tunnel. And when you read about the resurrection accounts, the evidence that shows that there was very common practices of crucifixion and the piercing of a person's foot, etc., all those archaeological evidences. And then also written by all members of the church, just good information on the plan of salvation, the structure of the church, elders, deacons, etc. There's nothing like it that we've seen on the market anywhere. It's been out now about 4 years. We've got about 75,000 copies of it out. And it's just something that I believe in with all of my heart, and think if you got it to every graduating senior going to a college, they would be prepared to deal with the kind of stuff that we dealt with right now. If you got it to a new Christian, they would get to places where they were reading the Bible and they would read stuff that some people hadn't learned in their Christian life. You know, I had a lesson I gave at Polishing the Pulpit where it was, how can a loving God allow or cause the death of innocent children? And a guy came up to me and he said, I've been a Christian for 30 years. I've never heard a good answer to that until today. Well, it's in that Bible, and if you were reading right there in some of those sections where that is written, you would have that answer right there, and it would answer a lot of questions for you that you probably have, but you didn't even know who to ask. And I just really think that the AP Study Bible is something that is a special resource that I do not believe you could find enough people to give it to or have. I mean, I've made sure my kids have them. My wife and I try to send them to high school graduates that send us graduation invitations. They're not going to throw a study Bible away. Anybody that we come in contact with, I just feel if there's somebody that's interested in the truth and will read, then this is going to help them know more about their Creator and be a stronger spiritual person. And they're very valuable, and I think they would be good for anybody. And so I will throw that out. And let me just tell you this. I've done a lot of talking, and you guys have done a lot of listening. And it's so encouraging to have people that will skip football games that they wanted to watch and skip house stuff that they needed to do and bring their kids and bring themselves to come and learn stuff that help them understand the Creator better. And it encourages me. And I leave my house for a weekend. I hate to leave my wife, hate to leave my kids, but I do it because I think it's valuable. And your presence here, I think, makes that statement as well. And I really do appreciate that. And I thank you for that.